Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have something a little bit different today. This is a roundtable discussion, a little follow-up of an aspect from my video on the recent 129 extended preview. It is, of course, the Ultra Instinct Pan that now exists in two forms, Hirotaka Nii's original version and Tadayoshi Yamamoto's correction. We've seen plenty of corrections in the past, so this is hardly something new to Super, but it is one of the few times where both the original drawing and the correction are really damn good, so the answer to which is better isn't as clear as it normally is. And joining me are two friends of mine. First is Olympia, otherwise known as OllyDB, a professional artist and, in my opinion, one of the best Dragon Ball fan artists, and Tyson, Z Hallams, who's really a music guy, but he's Hirotaka Nii's biggest fan, and he'd probably cry if I didn't invite him on. Hello.
Hi.
So, initial impressions of the two pans. I want to hear very vague thoughts, and then we'll go and touch on all of the specifics.
Well, I guess the most obvious observation to be made between these two images is Nii's drawing is far more dramatic with larger shapes and more exaggerated anatomy, where Yamamoto's is far more understated. When you first asked me to compare these two images, I was leaning towards Nii's design because I thought the exaggerated deltoid muscles, like on top of the shoulder, would lend it to a more dramatic and more punchy silhouette design. But when you actually distilled it to a silhouette design, I do think Yamamoto's overall silhouette design was actually a lot more clearer and a lot more communicative in terms of the contours. This is especially seen in the fists, where you can make out the shapes of the fists a lot more clearly. However, I think the flare in Nii's original design is very strong and kind of exemplifies what draws people to Dragon Ball. But yeah, that's just my quick take on this based on your silhouette distillation and
Yeah. No, I mean, I was similar. Like, When I first saw Yamamoto's correction, I was like, oh, I don't know if I like this, because I really love the shading and I really love the shapes of the original one. But the more I looked at it, I was like, well, I don't know. I feel like there are so many aspects of both, so I don't really know about that. Tyson, give me your basic opinions.
For sure. So when a lot of people looked at this, the first thing that they noticed is that Yamamoto's lacks a lot of that shading detail, especially in the torso, and that's what turned a lot of people off. I don't think that's necessarily bad. Shading doesn't have to be super, super complex all the time for something to look good. However, I do think a lot of just the general shapes and contours that Nii uses for the top half just are a lot better. The elbow, the elbow on our left side disappears in Yamamoto's, which is just something that, of course, the elbow wouldn't actually exist in that position, but it's something that's pretty common in Dragon Ball that just kind of implies, volume and direction. Yamamoto's, the chest covers less and there's less neck, which, I don't know, it kind of implies a sharper angle than is actually happening here. And then, of course, as far as like the tapering of the gi goes, it's a lot more dramatic and interesting to look at Nii's compared to Yamamoto's, which is just kind of stock, I guess. Other than that, there's only little tiny details that really distinguish the two, so it's hard to say.
Okay, but you sound like you're leaning more towards Nii then.
Of course I am.
Of course. Well, I think you bring up a good point though. So I think that's probably what we should touch on first. Then which is more anatomically correct, and then does something being anatomically correct or realistic, I guess is the best word to use, does that matter that much in a cartoon and something like Dragon Ball?
Yeah, I would say Yamamoto's is pretty obviously more more correct in with regards to anatomy, especially with that elbow bone that sort of sticks out. That ulnar bone would be hidden when the arm is in a straight position. And obviously, like, the deltoids and the pectorals are like very dramatic in Nii's original version. And as far as how far that counts in Dragon Ball, I think that definitely has to be modulated when it comes to how realistic you want to portray your anatomy, because while Yamamoto really commits to having more accurate anatomy in his drawing, it's kind of less memorable, it's less striking, and it kind of causes a plainer image. So as long as you know where to break the rules, you can still create an effective image while sort of breaking away from making something perfectly correct.
I don't know. Dragon Ball has always been this weird thing where obviously basic construction matters, but basic construction also definitely doesn't matter sometimes. I mean, you get ears that look the same no matter what angle you're at. There's just a lot of rules get broken pretty often. Just as long as, I don't know, let's say a neck is attached to a chest. As long as something like that isn't happening, bending the rules isn't, like, out of the question. It isn't out of the normal. And as long as it looks interesting, I think it's usually pretty acceptable, especially in this case.
Yeah.
Right.
The way construction rules and anatomy are kind of used in Dragon Ball has always been kind of hard to sort of get a grasp on for me because everybody approaches them a different way because it's highly stylized. So I don't think it's all that important, but it's definitely, I guess, good to have a foundation on which to stylize from, and if you don't, you can run into egregious errors like Toyotaro's necks and stuff like that.
So is there anything about these two that you'd say stands out as being particularly wrong to the point where you're like, well, this is I was gonna say this isn't right, but it's so far away from what is correct. It's kind of pushing outside of stylized. I think for me, when I look at the silhouette of Yamamuro's version, especially that far arm, something seems kind of off there to me, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems separated from his torso, comparatively. And I think that's just because he had to draw over Knee's version, which is kind of larger, and he was sort of compensating for that. But definitely the deltoids in Knee's drawing are like cartoonishly large, and his traps on the back of behind Goku's neck are like very angular, almost like cartoonishly so. I don't know, like when I look at the silhouette of Knee, it kind of evokes like the same sort of character design with Brawly, where he's got like these giant deltoids. Obviously it's not like the same level.
I get you though, yeah.
But yeah, like just the very exaggerated musculature of Knee's drawing is striking to me. I think with the right arm on Yamamuro's Goku, it is definitely like a little wrong, but it doesn't jump out at you the same way that Knee's like dramatic anatomy does.
Okay.
I was gonna say less so the anatomical correctness and more just the way that it's executed on that far arm. You look at the muscles. Obviously, Yamamuro toned down how thick the muscles are on that arm, which is fine. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But the problem is the actual contours that he uses on the outside for those muscles. Classic modern Yamamuro, really sharp angles, not a lot of curvature to them. But they're done in such an awkward way that it's toned down, especially on that top part of the arm, and when it connects to the bottom part, it's just, I don't know, it's just so incredibly awkward. Whereas
it's almost like that far side kind of, it's almost too skinny for where it meets the forearm. Exactly.
It's just incredibly small. You can wrap your little tiny fingers around it, and it's just, I don't know, it's incredibly, that was the thing that bothered me the most about Yamamuro's drawing. That entire arm, absent the fist, of course, the fist looks fine, but that entire far arm is just so awkwardly done and angular in a way that implies this really, really, really skinny shape that is just weird compared to the rest of the drawing. It's just not about it.
Yeah, the bicep really curves sharply into the forearm there.
Yeah. So we've got two versions here that neither of which are perfect. We've kind of nitpicked both here. I made a little hybrid. How do you feel about the hybrid?
I think the hybrid is really effectively done. Glad that you included the elbow detail, because
I don't know, for me, as far as the hybrid goes, everything that you included I would consider the best part of it, except, I don't know, it's hard to say. So talking about the far arm again, obviously in Knees the fist is a little bit more awkward as far as how it's drawn. However, in Knee's drawing, the fist is placed to where it implies that it's more in the background, whereas in Yamamuro's, it puts it in front of his gi, which is this, like, I mean, I don't know, if you act it out, you'll see it's like this incredibly awkward pose, which is something else that I noticed. So obviously, yeah, Yamuro's fist is better, but the fact that it's just like posed that way is awkward. But pretty much everything else about your hybrid, I think, is the best of all worlds.
Yeah, like the fist details on Yamamuro's drawing are also a lot better too. That should be noted as well. I like that. Well, I was gonna say, I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the right image before I said this, but I like that you included the elbow detail because while it might not be totally correct, it adds better to the visual communication of the image, and it's just kind of a landmark for the center of Goku's arm. Yeah, I think the hybrid is a pretty good middle ground for sure because you kept a lot of the really dramatic muscle detail.
Cool. Okay, final question then before we wrap things up. Was the correction needed, and do you think it changes the overall impact of the scene? Obviously, the episode hasn't aired yet, and we don't know how it's going to play out, but just from like an immediate look at the image, how do you feel? And yeah, was it necessary?
I don't think it was entirely necessary. I do think that there are some notable improvements in the fists, but other than that, no. It's supposed to be like this big reveal, I suppose. I mean, that's what it's being presented as. And a highly dramatic moment. I think Knee's drawing seems to suit the mood a lot better. And saying this obviously without seeing the episode yet, but I don't think the correction was entirely necessary.
I think, for me personally, there's two sides to this. One, on Knee's defense, this is a pan, which is something that people seem to be forgetting. So you're not going to be seeing the entire image at once. So it's especially important to pour these really interesting details into each particular part. That's why these interesting shapes and shading are really important, because you're going to be seeing these little tiny slices as it pans up. However, on a production side, I feel since we're seeing a correction from Yamamuro here, obviously he's going to be on the episode, and I would be willing to bet that he's going to be correcting more around this scene, especially since this whole thing is this big reveal of the final Ultra Instinct. So from a production side, it makes sense if he's going to be on it and he's going to be correcting things. It makes sense to correct more than one shot like we saw in 110. So, I don't know. There's arguments to both, but obviously I'm going to side with Knee because he's my pretty baby boy and I've been defending him for months and months now.
Yeah. I think some things look better, but overall, to me, it just creates a more plain image.
Cool. So 2 Knees. I think, I don't know. Like I said in my video on Sunday, like I instinctively preferred Knees, and then there were aspects of Yamamuro, and I've kind of been bouncing back and forth for so long. But then when I look at my hybrid, I've included way more aspects of Knee's work. So I guess I am Knee overall.
Well, there you have it. So is Toei gonna hire us on, or what's up?
I don't know. I guess I'll contact someone and they'll bring us in. It'll be great. All right. Thanks for coming on and talking to me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, AJ, for having us.
Not a problem. If you guys want to know more about Tyson and Olympia, I'll leave links to their social media or YouTube channels in the description below. Be sure to let me know in the comments section what you think of this. Obviously, we spoke about this a very little bit in my video on Sunday, but now we've had the full discussion. We've laid out all of the details in as much depth as what is really possible at this point before the episode airs. So let me know in the comments section below, which do you prefer and why. Be sure to rate the video if you enjoyed this discussion and would like to see more videos like this in the future on various topics. Don't forget to subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. Of course, my breakdown on the final episode will be out on Sunday. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.